Hey there, folks! My humans need a project, and frankly, I'm fresh out of ideas. I've searched here and there, up and down, and absolutely nothing. Then it hit me, like a door in the face. My treat room. It's in dire need of a makeover. My humans refer to it as
the dreaded kitchen pantry. Watch my humans transform this pantry into a beacon of organization and efficiency. Most importantly, increased storage for my treats, which have seemingly vanished at the moment.
Just wanted to show you how super easy this Grout Refresh by Mapai is to do and use. All that I did is used a plastic scrubby brush and Windex to scrub out this old grout. And I have one side over here that's already had the Mapai applied, and I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to put on here and what the steps are. Run a thin bead like you're squirting glue along it. Then take a rough, really stiff little craft brush like this, and all you're going to do, well, if I can get the brush in here right, you're just going to smear it in there. You don't care if it gets up on the tile, just quickly smear it. Just making sure you get the whole thing covered, and continue to do that with all the spaces. Then let it dry for about 30 minutes and we'll come back and show you the magic. I apologize for the video quality, but this is a really tight space, so it's hard to get a standing camera or have somebody else film. But I wanted to show you, I keep a nail handy that I keep into the top of this because it will dry shut on you and it wants to dry while you're doing it. Then I leave it in there, and then I put the little clear plastic cap back on it. One of these bottles is going to last you for a very large floor space, so don't buy a bunch of them, buy one and see how far it goes. It's about $20 and a cheap solution to grout. My hallway has been done for 3 years now and still looks perfect, so now I'm going to show you what you do next. This has been drying for about 30 minutes, so now this is just a spray bottle of water. I wet all the areas of grout. It's hard to see on this floor, but get it a pretty good dousing of water. That's going to set for about 30 seconds too before I start working on it, maybe a minute. You kind of tell when you start rubbing it. And so it's just taking pieces of paper towels. I usually start with a double one. Yep. And that's some of the refresh that I got on the floor. This is a wide spot in the grout. It's not because that it did not come off. Use some pressure on it. It rubs right off. If it feels a little bit dry, like that's wide because I had a blob of it come out of the bottle. So I'm going to wet that a little bit more before I start. And there you go. That's how easy it wipes off. If you notice that the back wall was kind of a mess and there was missing baseboard, that's because all the rest of my floors had been done previously, except for the bottom of this pantry floor, which I had done part way in, kept the floor clean, but I was like, it was too much trouble to get under the shelves to get there, and now we have all the shelves ripped out to finally paint this and get the very last part of our kitchen done. But you can see it's a perfectly straight, even, nothing's left on the tile, and it cannot get easier than that. It is way easier than trying to use the grout pins that don't work great, or using a paintbrush to get in there. And it's very durable and comes in any color that Mapai makes grout in. These are the raw wood shelves that are going into the pantry. They've been sanded, they have been wiped down with a damp cloth just to get all the sanding dust off. Don't waste your wipes on that. Then they were wiped down with the deglosser wipes so it does not raise the grain on this. If you put it on with a brush and the grain scrubby, you're going to horrifically raise the grain in any raw wood. And then you're going to have a ton of sanding to do to take care of that before you can paint. So what I wanted you to see with this is what needs to be fixed on this, because these are pine. These are composite pieces with some of the shelving. This is pieces of just cut lumber that have been put together, but not in the small chunks that this is. I wanted you to see the difference in, you don't have to prime this whole thing. This side needs nothing done to it. This side of it has one spot that's truly a knot that's going to need to be filled and sanded. You want to do that fill after you have deglossed, or expect that you're going to have to seal it with shellac before you can degloss. This piece has a lot on it that needs fixed. This is actually a vein in the wood that can bleed. These are knots that need to be covered. These dark areas are. This light area is not, that's grain. This light area around this actual knot doesn't need anything done to it. This doesn't, but all these little knots and places need to be filled. Those are the places it's going to bleed tannin. So on these, I'm going to show you quickly on a couple of these what you do, and then off camera, I'm going to do the rest of it. New model. It doesn't take tons. And I prefer a metal spatula, but you can certainly use a plastic cutting knife. And you can see just putting in the wood putty is doing a lot to camouflage that. Once this dries, I will sand it and I will seal this with shellac over the wood putty, simply because the places that make use of the putty that stays on your putty knife, or the wood fill rather, the damp plastic wood. Because it will have a different sheen. All those spots that I just filled will have a different sheen if I don't shellac them to seal them before I start painting, because it will absorb into it. And that can cause you to have to do a lot more paint layers than you really need to, because this should take 2 coats and I should be done with it.
What kind of wood filler are you using?
This is damp plastic wood. It comes in all different colors. You can get it from white to really dark. So depending on whether or not you're trying to stain something, you would, if you're painting, it really doesn't matter a lot, except I always like the natural, which is what this is, because it acts like a primer coat for me. As far as the coloration, I'm not having to worry about these not covering because they're so different in color from the wood. It dries pretty fast, so if it starts drying over what you're trying to fill, clean it off with paper towel. You don't have to have it completely smooth, but it certainly saves you a lot of sanding.
The one closest to me needs another hit, Mama, they can see it.
What?
The one closest to me needs another hit.
Okay. Pretty even. I have already sanded and wiped down with paper towel, just a dry paper towel to dust off the sanding residue. I prefer the hard block that you can make yourself with carpenter's tape to attach sandpaper to. This happens to be a block of plastic trim we had. It could be wood. It has more strength to it than the sanding sponges, and it goes a lot faster. And you can make it to the size you need. That would have taken me a lot longer with a sanding sponge because it just doesn't have the pressure. But this is ready now for me to put some shellac on, which I'm going to show you. And then once that has dried, I will wipe these down completely with a damp paper towel, and they'll be ready to start painting. But you don't have to shellac the entire thing. You just need to shellac where you have put the wood putty. And shellac, just like anything else, needs to be stirred. When you first open it up, it's going to look like a very pretty clear golden, but you need it to be stirred, and then it has a slightly cloudy appearance to it. You do want enough shellac that you can see that it has become wet with it, but you don't want thick coats. One, you don't need it, and two, it'll leave some slight brush strokes. Don't let the fact that you can see the knots again scare you into the fact that they haven't been sealed, because they have. They're filled, and this is what is actually sealing them. But they're perfectly level, and the shellac is coating it in so that the tannins won't bleed. And that's what's going to be done to all the rest of these, and then they're going to be ready to start painting. A lot of work has been done on these off camera as I was continuing to work, and you didn't need to see the whole process, but I wanted you to see how this looks at different stages. So this obviously has no finish on it. This has one coat of cashmere on it. And since it's the first coat, it's a little bit rough, and I'm going to show you what has to be done with that, because it's over raw wood. Otherwise it wouldn't be. This is 2 coats of cashmere. This actually, if it was a cabinet front, would need to have a 3rd coat, because there's some lighter spaces that some of the grain showed a little darker through it. This had a lot of knots on it that you saw when I was working on it before. Since this is going to be the very tip-top shelf, this side will never be seen. Even if I climbed up into the pantry, it would be hard to see this. So this has plenty on it to protect it, so I'm not putting 3 coats on this. The underneath side, though, that I still need to paint, is going to get 3 coats, because I will be looking up into the pantry and I will see the bottom of this all the time. But you can see how well just 2 coats of cashmere covered. And I'm going to show you how I do that, how I'm applying it to get that kind of coverage. But first, on this board, that it's the first coat, this is slightly rough because it slightly raised the grain. If I had used heavy deglosser on this, it would have been very heavy grain raise, because the water would have popped it up. But the paint does not lift it like that, but it does lift a little bit. So especially if you're going to be using this on cabinet doors or a piece of furniture, you really want it smooth, and I like my cabinet shelves to be really smooth. So all it takes
need to cut before you apply. I'm going to set up a second camera close up.
Okay. And then, because I always have it handy, and I don't always have water bottles handy. I don't know why, but I don't. I just use Windex or a little bit on the paper towel to make sure I have grabbed all that sanding dust, which isn't much, but now it's perfectly smooth, and it's not going to have that roughness that will create texture in your paint. So now this is ready for its second coat of paint. With any color of the paint, but especially with cashmere, you apply a liberal coat. On a board this size, or on the front of a cabinet, I'm going to divide it into thirds. And don't waste your time trying to get the paint on perfectly. And you can see how often I'm dipping, and it's just the tip of my brush. That also doesn't get paint all the way up into the top of this and waste your paint when you're trying to clean it out, because you're never going to use paint that you get all the way up in here. First rolls across. Yes, there's a crazy amount of bubbles sometimes. On the raw wood layer, there is not, and you'll see a difference in a minute. This is barely touching. I'm letting it roll itself. I'm not pressing down on it. And then get moving on the second. If I turn my brush, that keeps me from running a drip across this. And I'm barely getting up into where I have already painted before, because I don't want to keep re-rolling over that. I can see where my edge is, so I am not rolling all over back into that. I'm just rolling where I had brush into it. Same thing when I come here. Don't want to spend forever applying the paint or rolling the paint. That's what creates really bad texture in any of the colors or dull spots in the finish. You can feel that was a little bit thinner. My brush was starting to drag, so I added more. This is my front edge. I don't want to get it on that other board, which I normally do not paint on top of them. This front edge has already had 2 coats from where I did the bottom. So this is its final edge coat. Well, a little more paint on the garage floor. Nothing on it. Here we go. And I'm rolling under that edge because there's bound to have been a little bit of overage on it. Now you can see 2 coats. You should not see thick and thin coats. If you're applying the paint heavy enough, and you can see I didn't wind up with a ton of big bubbles left, it's a good finish here. So this needs to move on. And I will start this one. Same process. You really have to work quickly when it's raw wood because it really wants to dry fast because it's drying from the top and the bottom because the wood is dry and absorbent. But contrary to what some people will say, it does not soak in tons of paint. If you see, I haven't done my brush any more often on this than I did on that second coat. But you do see there are fewer bubbles. And if I had waited and slowed down putting this on, I would get bad roller marks in it because I'm dealing with raw wood. Why this is easier than getting out spray equipment. don't want that thin. When you feel your brush start to grab, you need more paint. I'm going sideways at the ends because I don't want to dump a bunch of paint overage off the ends. Both sides of raw wood have to be stained or painted, or they warp really badly over time. I will get the last coat on this front edge when I do the next coat on this. And on anything, this is what your first coat of cashmere should look like. You shouldn't have thicks and thins where you can see roller marks and you can see areas that aren't done. Jim, can you hold this for just a second so I can trade these things? Move this one out of the way. And then you can see on this one why I don't put primer on even over these knots that have been covered and shellacked. The primer in the paint is more than sufficient. And since they're sealed, they are not going to bleed through. Yes, I could have painted this whole board, but with it raw wood, not a good plan. It will be drying into the wood, and then you're going to have thicks and thins that you're going to fight with. The next coat, so that I don't have lap marks or dry marks, I'll still do the same thing. I'll split it. It's just as easy as painting the whole board. And you can see the knots are covered beautifully. Finish painting these out for the amount of paint that they need. These are all now on the top side, so the top side of the shelves will all get 3 coats. After putting the third coat of cashmere on this shelf and looking at 2 coats of cashmere on the shelf, I made the executive decision that These are perfectly durable with 2 coats. They're going to be pantry shelves. I just wanted them to match the rest of my kitchen, which has cashmere uppers. So the rest of the shelves are not getting 3 coats, but they are going to get a band of copper along the very front edge that I will antique with black antiquing gel so that it matches the pulls that are in my kitchen, which are antique copper. So that's where we are with this, but I wanted you to see that this is 2 coats, this is 3 coats, and it wasn't, the 2 and 3 coats are not soaking into the wood, only the first coat would have gone in a little bit with raw wood. So even on the 2 coats, there are places where a half coat, where that you would just do the area that looked thin, would work, but I have never had luck doing that with cashmere. All the other colors I've been able to do that, but not cashmere. Cashmere I've always needed a full coat to keep it from looking like it was different levels of paint. So next up, copper, and then start reassembling this pantry. Because this is a very, very thin, very easily bent copper tape, what I am going to do, what I've done here is we've taped down the strips that I need for the front of all the shelves over wax paper so that this countertop is protected and so we can keep a hold of these. I know that this copper is too long for the shelves, so it's fine that I don't get every bit of it antiqued. This way I can do it in one shot to get this all done at the same time. I know it's all going to look the same, and I won't have any black antiquing on my newly painted white shelves. So this is how I'm going to do it with this. The tape is tape we had from a project several years ago. I cannot go the entire length of this. If I do that, the antiquing gel will have dried partially before I get there. I'm not putting a full coat on here because I don't want a lot on here. Sorry, there's a very annoying bunch of gnats that have hatched out down here in Florida for the spring. They're in every spring, but no matter what you do, you can't get rid of all of them. I'm going to take folded paper towel, blot over this. When it gets closer to the other end, you'll be able to see this better. Doing just this section's told me I need to go in even shorter sections, adding this on here. I'm not putting very much antiquing gel on this. I'm going to try smudging it this way because that seemed to be working when I was adding back on. A full coat will completely lift off. Yep, smudging is what's going to work the best to get the look that I want on these. It doesn't have to match exactly. because the finish on antiqued hardware doesn't match exactly either. And it's a very light pounce. If you pounce hard, you lift everything off. Don't like that there's a brush stroke there. I don't care if this gets underneath because I'm going to peel it off anyway. The brush is still getting very little antiquing gel on it. It's just pushing up into the bristles from pouncing. Going back and looking at areas that don't look exactly the way I want them to. And there's enough antiquing gel in this paper towel now to lift off and leave behind exactly what I want. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna let it go. Let it dry. Looking up and down this end from like right here down, where this got the sweet spot of being just moist enough, is exactly what I want. From here back is not. The nice thing about the antiquing gels, you can get them wet. It does take some effort, but it's one of those things that the antiquing gel will let you do. It's one of the things that makes it very nice to work with. Any water that's still there. I could keep working to get every bit of that off. This is pretty much there. Now, I'll go back and do what I just did 2 minutes ago. I'm going to work from this edge backward because it got some water into it. By not doing a full coat, you're starting with some high and low areas of the antiquing gel, which keeps you from having just a solid thin coat of color on it when you start to blot it off. And now the whole length of this has the same look to it, instead of this down here having some darker striations in it. Now I'm gonna let it dry.
Wow, this is what I call a treat room. Humans! How would they ever survive without me?